Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of Track Records, where we discuss all things music with your hosts, Kenny and Barry. And Barry, before we begin, we have an email from an interested viewer who wanted to know. He says, "Dear Barry, I know you're a big movie fan, and I want to know, is it true that Waterworld is your favorite movie of all time?"
Why the fuck would somebody ask that? In fact, I know the movie, of course,
Yes.
and I know how it was this colossal bomb back in whenever it was, the late 90s, but I've never seen it. So I cannot confirm nor deny that it's my favorite movie.
Okay. I will say, having seen it once, it's almost worth seeing for how bad it is. The rumor, the legend, whatever, it's true. I mean, you can talk about other movies, but this is, I would go to my grave. It's top 10 worst movies of all time. So,
Hate watching can be fun.
yeah. And that's why I used to love Mystery Science Theater, where they just mock the films as they're playing them. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And along that note, I have to tell kind of a funny anecdote
Yeah.
about hate watching, or about a movie that's so bad it's good. Um, Michelle and I, this was whenever it came out, early 90s, went to see that movie Boxing Helena,
Oh, yeah.
which was David Lynch's daughter's
Yeah.
debut
Yeah.
directorial effort. And not knowing much about it, thinking, okay, it's Lynch's daughter, I'll give it a chance. It had Sherilyn Fenn in it, who was hot from Twin Peaks. And
Yeah.
anyway, we're seeing it in San Francisco at a big theater, and the place is packed. And it quickly becomes evident that, and by the way, this, I think, our second date, and I ended up marrying this woman, by the way.
Good
And
date movie. Yeah.
yeah, and so that plays into
Mm.
what I'm about to tell you. Anyway, it quickly becomes obvious that this movie's pretty awful, and the audience starts laughing at it, and it grows and grows and grows until there's this one scene that goes on way too long, for, like, I don't know, it seemed like 5 minutes of slow motion and Sherilyn Fenn in this fountain and getting all wet, and it's supposed to be really intense and sexy, but the crowd was laughing so fucking hard, and I was too. I mean, just losing it, that I pissed my pants. I was laughing so hard. And this is on the second date with who was about to become, my wife, a few years down the road. Anyway, that's just my favorite bad movie. So bad that it was totally enjoyable story.
You can only imagine if the director had been there to see
Yeah,
that reaction from the audience.
yeah,
You'd be
awful.
you'd rather have people leave than people laugh.
Ha-
You know.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever laughed so hard that you wet yourself? And I'm embarrassed to say that, but
I have not, and I've laughed pretty hard. I've laughed so hard. I remember one time actually in San Francisco as well, where I was actually slamming my hand against a wall to just cause me like a little pain to like stop the laughter because I couldn't get a hold of myself.
that's a weird sensation when
Yeah.
it's uncontrollable and you start losing control of your body and
Yes.
bodily functions. By the way, who asked that question? Was that your brother?
No, it's just some random listener. So,
Really?
yep.
Huh.
So the
Why do you think that question was asked? I mean, I can't
don't know.
think of why somebody would possibly
Uh,
ask that question.
Another viewer wanted to know if your favorite song of all time was Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves.
You're kidding, right?
I've just been going through the mailbag. I don't know what I can
Yeah,
tell you.
yeah. So both of our viewers then sent in emails.
Yes,
I do like that song, though.
it is
I
a good
will
song.
say,
Yeah,
yeah,
the Cher back in her heyday. So
totally. Yeah, yeah. I think she got a lot of shit at the time when that song came out, for appropriating that culture, and
well, it's interesting because then
Native
also
American thing.
around the same time, Half Breed came out.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, so yeah,
It was more so that song.
yeah, so yeah. She had
All
her
right,
own
take it
son.
easy. See you
Okay.
later.
So, do we have more of your records that have been recent arrivals?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
oh, actually, quick question for you. I'm sorry. Let me ask you a quick question about soundtracks because we've discussed soundtracks a lot, and I know they are one of your favorite genre.
Yeah.
The Miller's Crossing soundtrack, which is one we
By
both really enjoy.
Carter
uh,
Burwell.
yep, whose soundtracks are great. So not only do I really like that, but I love Frank Patterson's version of Danny Boy. And I'm curious, do you like that as well, or do you just like, Carter Burwell's music?
I like his music. I, I don't really, yeah.
That's not your jam.
No, old songs like Danny Boy, whatever. Yeah, they don't move me.
Okay.
And it's not that I dislike it. And
Yeah.
if it fits in to the context of the movie like that, then it's great. But it's not like I would seek that out to listen to.
And you're not a Sinatra fan? Frank, not Nancy.
I Yeah, no, I am actually.
Okay.
I again, I'm not listening to Sinatra all the time, but I must have 15 Sinatra records that I picked up over the years at mainly at thrift stores.
Okay.
But yeah, I like them. You know, it's kind of hard to just say, "Oh, I dislike Frank Sinatra." Uh, that I can't imagine anybody would just out and out say they don't like him
Well,
or
it
his
goes back
music.
to what I was saying previously about people who just totally quickly dismiss opera or classical music or jazz or hip hop
Mhm.
or reggae. Some people just automatically will dismiss a genre and they really haven't heard it. And so for me with rap and hip hop, for example, they're not my favorite genre and it's not stuff I listen to a lot. That said, there's definitely a lot of tracks I really do like very much.
Mhm.
And
Like
so
what?
so as far as Run DMC, I love Run DMC.
Mhm.
They're great, and that record, King of Rock, I've actually played quite a bit. Um, in terms of hip hop, I actually really like trip hop more than hip hop, but trip hop wouldn't exist without hip hop. But like when I come across, and this is one of the good things about streaming, someone mentions this song by Public Enemy or this song by Chuck D or even Kanye or whoever, I'll check it out, or Drake or Usher or Beyonce. I'll listen to it just to see, and I usually don't care for it, but I'm like, let me give it a shot. I definitely like some Ice-T tracks. There's a great one off the Tank Girl soundtrack called Big Gun. Love that song. So it's except for Run DMC, it's less an album and more a track here, a track there. So
Uh, yeah, I hear you. And to your point, there's some old school uh, rap or hip hop that I do like a lot, and a couple of the ones you mentioned. And ah, the one, the artist from that era that I like the most is Ice-T. Actually, he's got this record called "Original Gangster," and I think it came out in '89 or something. And I'm not a big rap guy, but man, I love that record.
yeah, and
It's so creative, in the confines of that genre of music. It's just so damn creative, and I feel like it holds up today.
yeah, and that's the cool thing, and that's why you shouldn't just dismiss a genre unheard. Beastie Boys, another band I like, although not a Beastie Boys fanatic by any means, but I definitely like them. I'm not one of those devotees who thinks Paul's Boutique is one of the great albums of all time.
Mhm.
I think it's fine. There's people who are like that's the Sergeant Pepper's of rap, and I don't feel that way. But of course, I don't feel that way about Sergeant Pepper's. So there's that.
Um, I wanted to circle back to clarify something I'd mentioned last week. I was talking about Nine Inch Nails and how I considered that faux dark music,
Mm.
and a lot of that is based on I saw Nine Inch Nails before they had really hit it big. They were part of the very first Lollapalooza tour in '91, and that was the first I had not only seen Nine Inch Nails, but the first I'd heard of them. And Trent Reznor during that show was running around the stage like a maniac, throwing keyboards, tackling bandmates, coming across like he was this out of control maniac who could not be stopped and was just so full of angst and energy and anger, and it came off as the most contrived fucking thing I'd ever seen. And that's always stayed with me. It just seems so forced and so phony that it soured me on the band ever since.
And it's interesting because when it is contrived, it's a horrible thing. But I've also been at shows where I could tell it was not at all. I saw the Psychedelic Furs in their first tour in America, and at one point Richard Butler left the stage and started like climbing up this ladder, going to the catwalk, and the roadies were freaking out. Like I was watching them because they were like, okay, he's going to bite it and we're going to be fired and we're never going to get a job again. And it was pretty interesting. Clash concert at that same
But
venue.
before you go on,
Yep.
that's not the same in the sense he's
I'm getting,
not acting
yes, I'm
like
getting,
some angry dude who's out of control and can't
yep,
control himself. He's
uh,
so full of angst.
I'm getting there. The
Okay.
the Clash, the same venue, the Orpheum. One of the many times I saw the Clash, and a few times I saw them there. There was a fight in the right in front of the stage,
Mhm.
in the mosh pit, and the bouncers are like trying to get guys and throw them out, and Strummer is trying to stop the bouncers from doing that, and he finally actually jumps down into the mosh pit. Okay, and he's down there for like a minute or so, and everyone else in the theater is like trying to like crane their neck to see what the hell is going on. And this is in the middle of clampdown, and Strummer reaches up and they hand him the mic stand, and he brings it down to the audience, and he says, "We're not fucking around. We're not working for the clampdown," and sings the final verse from inside the mosh pit, surrounded by everyone.
Yeah.
And once again, you could tell this was not planned in any way, and that was fantastic. Now, the last one, also, in my opinion, not contrived, but you'll have to make up your own mind. At a South by one year, South by Southwest Festival, Kim and I were seeing a band called the Felice Brothers, and they're playing, and the lead singer is running around on the stage, and at one point he takes himself and hurtles himself like a missile into the drum kit, much to the drummer's surprise, if not shock.
Mhm.
And then they have to like sort of pick him up and like get him back into a position where he can sing again. And some people would think that's shtick. I'm sure some people felt that way about the Who when they go and smash their instruments, and sometimes it was. But
Well,
but
if it's spontaneous
yeah,
and it's just a spontaneous thing and not some uh, um, pre-planned
yeah,
nonsense like the Nine Inch Nails thing seemed
yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's a different story.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
and you can sense it.
yeah,
If you're in the audience and
yep.
you see that sort of thing, you can sense it. And also, ever since the Who started that sort of thing by Pete Townsend smashing his guitar and then Keith Moon joining in by bashing his drums, but everything after that has been kind of like, oh come on, this has already been done and
It's
it's
been
been
done.
done
Yeah, yeah.
way better and in a somewhat authentic way, even though it became somewhat contrived for the Who. They were still the first ones to really do it for the
Yep,
most part.
yep.
Keith Richards will claim that Pete stole that from him, but
Mm,
that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, I just wanted to circle back on
yep.
that when I was talking shit about Nine Inch Nails. That's why. And also, I had mentioned that I think Metallica is their music just grates on me, and it's um,
And
uh,
everyone's always going to have those bands. And I
yeah.
think also something does stick with you, and it's hard to separate it once something like that sticks with you. So it's hard for you to view, and I'm not defending Nine Inch Nails, but it's hard for you to view them separately because that's so influenced you. I used to be a huge Pixies fan, and I saw them on the reunion tour, and you could so tell, especially with Frank Black, that they were just doing it for the money. I mean, I was watching his face, and I could just tell he just had this
Going through
attitude
the
of,
motions.
yeah. And ever since then, I never play Pixies music anymore.
Mm.
And again, and I was a massive fan, and I love their music, but it's so not scarred me. That's way too strong, but it just made me lose
It's
interest.
sullied their legacy,
Yes.
and yeah, that happens almost with every band. It seems like these days, and I
And
get why.
yep.
These are people who are not are probably not making enough money in music to support themselves anymore. And so when an opportunity like that would present itself, like the Pixies to go back out on tour and probably make more money than they've ever made,
Yep.
you can't fault them. But it is a bit of a bummer if you're a longtime fan and you can sense that he's just going through the motions.
And it's why I'm so careful when I go to see those sort of shows. Kim wanted to go see Gang of Four, having never seen them before. And I was hesitant for the same reason because of the Pixies, but we went and they were fantastic.
Yeah, you and I talked
Yeah.
about that before. I saw them on the same tour
Yeah.
in Seattle, and you saw them in Austin, right?
Boston.
Boston.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about that show is it was all of the four original members,
Yeah.
which that's pretty crucial. Even, let's just say, oh, it's not the original bass player. It's just the bass player, just the drummer.
Yeah.
But for certain bands, it it just doesn't work out if any of the original members are missing. It's just not the same thing. And Gang of Four having all four guys that made it pretty special, I thought.
And so the drummer, Hugo Burnham, was actually living in Brookline at the time, the town I grew up in, and my parents still lived in. And he actually posted somewhere, I can't remember where he posted it because this is the early days of social media, but that he needed a ride to the show. And so I responded, of course, but someone else had already responded. But I was so ready to pick him up and drive him to the show. I was bummed that someone else responded. And they're, by the way, one of the few bands I can think of where when Dave Allen, the original bass player, left and was replaced by Sarah Lee, that Dave Allen was terrific and Sarah Lee was great. It's rare that I think a band member leaves and is replaced by someone who's equally good, or better. I mean, that's, highly unusual. It's like why with Dream Syndicate, I love the first lineup in the first album. And for me, it just downhill after that because band members started leaving immediately.
Yeah, I agree. That's one band that suffered. Their uniqueness basically dropped off after that first record. The Days
everyone was out the door. Yeah, and that's a fantastic record.
Sure is.
And it must be hard also when you're in a band, especially if you're in a band and you're not one of the, like if you're Bill Wyman, the Bill Wyman of your band, okay, and changes are being made, nobody's asking you your opinion, and you can just go along with it or you can leave, and those are your only choices.
Seems like with the Stones, once Mick or Keith dies, then it'll finally be over. But let's say Ron Wood goes before either of them, they'll keep going.
Yeah, they'll definitely keep going.
In fact, maybe they would still be going as the Rolling Stones if it's just Mick.
Yeah.
They
just played Boston.
Wouldn't put it past him.
He and Keith are 80. And they just played Boston. They played like a 2.5-hour show at a football stadium.
Yeah, I saw it in the
crazy. Globe. And he looks pretty good for 80.
Man, I didn't see any clips of the show or anything, but I can still imagine he's running around like a person half his age, if not a quarter of his age. He's
crazy.
In such good shape still, seemingly.
And you mentioned, by the way, this a few weeks ago, we were talking about The Who and talking about at one point, like they were like the definition of rock and roll, like, around the Who's Next Time.
Sure.
And I think those songs, stuff like Won't Get Fooled Again and Baba O'Reilly really are that. But the other type of rock and roll that the Stones really mastered, like really more than any other band, is a song like Honky Tonk Woman, where like that funky, bluesy, it's a different type of rock and roll.
It's more groove oriented,
yeah,
for sure.
Tumbling Dice, like that sort of, the barroom type rock and roll sound.
The Stones at their best, and what made their best songs so good was always the groove.
Yeah,
always.
And very different than the Who, or very different than the Beatles or Zeppelin.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Well, Zeppelin was.
They would probably
pretty much a groove oriented
the next one
at their best,
but again in a different sort of way.
Much more bombastic and much harder than the Stones. But even stuff like Jumpin' Jack Flash, the reason that is so catchy is because the groove is just absolutely perfect. And no matter how many times you hear that song, when it kicks in, you just can't help but like feel the groove.
And it's amazing that on songs like that and Street Fighting Man and so forth, that Keith was playing an acoustic guitar, not an electric guitar. He's running it through an amp and all, but still it's amazing. You think of the Stones, you think of Keith, you immediately picture like a Fender Strat. And a lot of his stuff was acoustic, and with an open E tuning, which is where we start getting more into your world than my world when I read about the various chord progressions and so forth.
Believe me, that's not my world either. As a drummer, as the joke goes, what do you call a guy who hangs out with musicians?
What?
a drummer.
There you go. When we saw my brother's sister and I saw Marianne Faithful, and she said, what do you call a musician without a girlfriend?
Homeless.
Yes. although
Okay.
although my brother heard it as hopeless, and so we had a whole argument after, was it homeless or hopeless? But
I could,
obviously it was homeless.
either would work.
Yes. So
Um,
yeah.
so uh, this is a really good record I picked up recently. You could see it, I'm
Yep.
assuming.
Yep.
John Lee Hooker with the great title, Born in Mississippi, Raised Up in Tennessee.
Mhm.
It's an early 70s record of his. And I don't know if you've dug into John Lee Hooker much, but his 60s and 70s records, and even going back earlier when it was predominantly just him and a guitar, so these records incorporated a band behind him, records from this era, and this being a perfect example of that. Really good. I'm not a huge blues guy, but old school blues like this, some BB King, who are some of the other Sonny McGee and Brownie Terry. I think that's, is it Sonny McGee and yeah, Sonny
Yep.
McGee and um, stuff like that, from and Howlin' Wolf, stuff like that. I really dig, because it does feel, this record particularly feels so authentic, and it's really good blues record if you're ever looking for some blues to listen to that sounds and feels authentic.
And so, not to deny the talent of John Lee Hooker, I like his music, what I've heard and all, but do you think he would have gotten a chance to put out albums in the 70s if it wasn't for the Rolling Stones and Zeppelin and
Yeah, I
giving them
do.
a renewed audience? So
Yeah, I do, because he was putting out records before
yeah.
the Stones
Yep.
came into prominence, but the difference would have been his records wouldn't have been as popular,
Okay.
and
Yep.
they may not have been on major labels. Like, I
Yeah.
think this was originally on, probably on ABC
Mm.
Records. This reissue is on Geffen of all things, but yeah, I do think they still would. Or Muddy Waters, for example, being another one who I lump into this category of like really good blues that I enjoy listening to. Yeah, all those guys would have still continued putting out records. Maybe not on Chess or ABC,
Yeah.
or one of John Lee Hooker's best records is on Impulse of all things. Um, but yeah, I think
But I
they
do
would have
like a lot of that stuff.
continued to have careers.
I like
Um,
Lightning Hopkins, Howlin' Wolf, Jimmy Reed, and I was surprised when they released it, but when that Robert Johnson box set came out,
mhm,
that was fantastic.
sure,
So
sure. And uh, I have a funny anecdote about John Lee Hooker.
yeah.
So when I was living in San Francisco, one of my roommates, this girl was always hanging out at our place. This really young girl, really young, cute girl who was hanging out because of one of my roommates who lived there. Um, her mom was married to John Lee Hooker
Wow.
at the time, and it you know, John Lee Hooker was her stepdad, wasn't
Yeah.
her father. Her
Right.
biological father was her stepdad. But she would talk about, because John Lee Hooker lived just outside of San Francisco at that time. And so it was kind of interesting to hear her talk about him. And basically, as he was this legendary music figure, obviously,
Yeah.
but she knew him as her stepdad, and also like a very pervy old stepdad, because he was probably 60 something at that time in the
Yeah.
early 90s. And this girl was young, and she just knew him as like, she had to stay away from him because he was really pervy, which is just a kind of a crazy anecdote to
That
hear
is
about
interesting.
somebody like this.
It's funny because when I was living in San Francisco at the same time as you, although it was after that, and Bill and I had a friend named Lexi, a girl who hung out with us named Lexi, and her stepdad was Gail Goodrich, the former basketball player
Mhm.
for at
The
UCLA and with
Lakers.
the Lakers. Okay, and at first I was like, yeah, that's bullshit. Then we're like, who would choose Gail Goodrich? Like who would choose, like, because she was, this is like 1990 and she was in her 20s. Like, who would choose that person? Like if you're gonna make something up, like how would she would even know who he was? So we decided it was probably the truth.
So you didn't mention the connection between the girl and Gail Goodrich. Was it
Uh,
his?
Her stepdad.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
so same sort of
Yeah.
situation.
So same things. That's what
Gotcha,
made me think of it. So
gotcha. So much like John Lee, and this was probably his second marriage, and
yeah. Yeah.
probably married a much younger woman, and
Yes.
because this girl's mom was not very old.
Yeah.
Um, at the time, I think this girl was about 17. So, um, and another much cooler anecdote is um, I got to see him in a tiny little club called Morty's in San Francisco, which was a little club that my band used to play in
Wow.
all the time. And he would do surprise shows, come into the city,
Mm.
San Francisco, and do these tiny little shows, just almost unannounced, like you would just hear about it through the grapevine. And one of my friends from back home at the time just happened to be visiting me at that time. So we went to see John Lee Hooker, and he was a big music fan. So it was a big treat for him
That's
as
awesome.
well. And it was, of course, a really incredible show.
I never understood why they charge more money the bigger the venue. It's like I'll pay more money the smaller the venue.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, sometimes you have to do that too for little surprise shows.
right, but
Sometimes.
like like I have no need to ever. First of all, I have no need to ever see the Stones again, of course. But in particular, in a football arena, if they were playing Morty's,
Yeah.
I'd go for it.
Yeah. And spend some cash.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I just, that's what I want. And again, it's this fucked up thing of like the bigger the place, the bigger the tour, the more expensive tickets are. It's so.
Do you remember Morty's? It was in North Beach.
I don't. It sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know if that's true or not. So,
In that
um,
strip with all at the time what used to be strip clubs,
yeah,
like the Condor and Big Al's,
yeah, I remember
and
that whole strip. So,
yeah, like
because
right when you drive into North Beach coming from the Bay Bridge. And I saw something recently, some movie that took place in San Francisco in the early 60s, and there was a shot of that street in this movie. I forget what the movie was, but anyway, it was cool to see all those things that I remember from my time there. And of course, Morty's was there. So I love seeing stuff like that.
I'm walking down that street with Bill and the girl he's dating at the time, and we walk by those strip clubs, and a guy, who the hawker yells out, "Hey, you guys gonna come in?" And we like keep walking. He goes, "No, no, come on in," and we just keep walking. And the guy goes, "Bill, come on, you love this place." Because Bill had been a
Right.
frequent visitor,
Unbeknownst to you.
yeah,
And he was playing it cool.
and the girl is going, "Bill, he's calling to you," and Bill's going, "No, he must mean some other Bill," and he's going, and he's going, "Bill, you were just here a couple weeks ago. Come on back." It was classic.
Was he embarrassed?
Oh, mortified. So
That's
speaking of
funny.
Morty's, so yeah,
Why would you hide,
yeah,
going to those places? That's
yeah.
fun. With a good friend.
Yeah.
That's
No, because the
funny.
girl he was dating was with us.
Oh, I missed
Okay.
that point.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
now I get it.
No, he wouldn't have cared with me there. It was like this girl was there. She was the one saying,
Gotcha.
"Bill, he's calling you." And Bill's like, "No, no, no, he's talking to someone
Yeah.
else."
Okay. Okay.
And he's turning
That's
red.
different.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
So,
No wonder he was trying to keep it on the down low.
no, but it had just been him and I. He would have been trying to convince me to go in. So yeah.
Gotcha.
So it was classic. So
All right.
but there were some good clubs in San Francisco. I really like Slim's, Great American Music Hall. Even for considering its size, Fillmore was good. There's someplace
Fillmore
called,
was great.
yeah, the Independent, or
Yeah,
yeah,
that's there still, and
some
that
Murray
opened
McKee
up
there.
after we were both gone.
No, because I saw
And,
Murray McKee there.
okay, excuse me. That was
So,
after I was gone then,
got it. Okay.
which was only a year or two
Yeah,
before
yeah.
you left.
Before you loaded up your truck with 17 plants and hit the road for the Pacific Northwest.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I know I've told you this one plant made it.
Yeah.
That was stupid. You, in fact, that's right. You helped me load all that
Yes.
stuff
Yeah.
in my little pickup.
And thinking to myself, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah. But I'm glad one made it.
2020.
Yes.
Next up on the hit parade, could you
Don't
see
recognize. Yeah.
it's a John Cale record called
Got it.
Mercy.
Okay. What
Came
year?
out last year,
Okay.
and was getting lots of positive reviews, lots of accolades. Man, what a disappointing piece of shit this is. Um, I don't know, maybe I need to listen to it more. I've listened to it all the way through a couple times, and it's a bunch of half-baked song ideas with really poor sounding music to accompany it that sounds like it was all made on a computer. It's just one of the most disappointing records I bought in a long time.
So why the accolades, do you think? Because he's John Cale?
Because he's John Cale and he's in his 80s and he's still putting out records. And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm just missing something great about it. But I'm telling you, this record is not very good.
Mm,
And I liked I like John Cale a lot. I
mm.
have many of his records, and most of them I think are brilliant. His last one before this came out in 2012. I like very much. It's called Adventures in Nookie Wood.
Okay.
And I figured, okay, that I like that record a lot, and I'm hearing good things about this one, so I better pick it up. And couldn't be more disappointed. Um, and you know, I hand it to the guy. He's in his, I'm pretty sure he's in his 80s at this point. He's been making music since the mid 60s, starting with the Velvet Underground. So kudos to him for still putting out records. He's got another record coming out next month, in fact, that is piggybacking on this, and they're marketing it as, if you like Mercy, you're going to love it. He continues his hot streak with this next record. And what I must mention here about this record, it does another one of those things that I tend to frown upon, is it has a bunch of guest stars
Mm.
on songs. For example, let's see, Wise Blood, and it's usually hipper, younger artists
Yep.
who probably want to be on this record because it's John Cale and he's legendary. But you listen to the contributions, Wise Blood, Sylvan, Esso. It's a band. I don't know much about them. Fat White Family, Tell She, or Shy, I don't know. Animal Collective. So these are hipper,
Yep.
more contemporary artists, and you listen to the songs that they're supposedly featured on, and you would not know unless somebody said, "Oh, okay, that little keyboard part created by a computer was done by Wiseblood," or
Yeah.
that faint background vocal was done by the Sylvan Esso. But
So
anyway, that just pisses me off, that kind of thing, because it's all about marketing to try and get younger people to buy this, and don't get suckered into it is my advice.
so you won't be pre-ordering the next release?
Oddly enough, I already did. So go figure. Go figure.
Okay,
audience,
audience, please respond to that.
Yeah,
Because
well,
I don't know what to tell you.
I haven't given up on him.
I guess not.
And again, like I said, there's so many other records by him that I absolutely adore. So that one stinker is not going to get me to completely close the door on him.
I think it's impossible to release that many records or write that many books or act in that many movies and always have it be great. It's just not possible.
Well, it goes back to our conversation from several episodes ago about bands who do that.
But even Bowie, he hit the wall. In Roxy Music, they ended before they hit the wall. But even then, they weren't recording over 30 years, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
True. It's why like not every Dylan album is great. Why not every Stones album is great. I don't think it's possible
for that kind of longevity. It's one thing. 15 years, maybe 20.
Which is still super impressive, obviously, but 40 years, nobody.
Well, or even 50.
Or 50.
Dinosaur bands.
Yeah.
Well, like John Cale.
Yeah, or
easily 50 years he's been making
unless
records.
You're Dinosaur Jr. Little dinosaur joke. But yeah, and so I wouldn't, even if I don't like that album, and I would say I don't like it, but I wouldn't be super critical of it the way I would be in someone in a much shorter run.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's a good point. But still, I guess my heightened expectation,
and that's you can't stop that.
It seems so bad.
Yeah.
Because some people whose opinion I put a lot of credence in.
Yeah.
People had told me that they really like this record. So I figured it's a can't miss. But anyway, enough about that. You want to take a look at some of the other stuff I've picked up recently?
Yeah, because next time we're going to touch on some of the groups I had mentioned before that don't get enough feature. So let's go ahead with you
Oh,
though.
and in fact, I told you
Oh yeah,
old 97s
right. Satellite rides. Yeah.
satellite rides, and
And
excuse the CD
yeah.
format, but couldn't find it on record. Um, okay, I'm going to be Debbie Downer
Oh, that's fine.
this